Alright, welcome back to my boss build series, and I am on Revenant Hunter today, showcasing Warden's Law, the Adept variant from this week's Grandmaster Europa Nightfall. And I'll be showcasing it against one of my favorite precision-based bosses, AKELOUS. And I'm going to be trying to maximize the damage output of Warden's Law with the exotic legs Lucky Pants, and with Stasis as the subclass for Whisper of Rending, because I believe Whisper of Rending gives you a 40% damage buff to frozen targets using weapons with primary ammo. So my thinking was get a Silence and Squall or some of my abilities out on AKELOUS, which will continuously freeze them, and that will allow me to, on occasion, hit some of those 40% numbers. So I do believe it works. I'm also combining this with a burst damage rocket launcher, the best burst damage rocket launcher in the game, Cold Comfort, because the Lucky Pants buff only lasts for a few seconds, and then once you're out of luck, then you have to use something else for the rest of the damage phase, at least on console, because it is slow to shoot AKELOUS's eyes out. I'm using an exotic trace rifle. If it's not a machine gun that I'm using to shoot his eyes out solo, then it's pretty much got to be an exotic trace rifle. Even a normal trace rifle I struggle with shooting the eyes out in time, and I'm doing this with like 10 sensitivity and 0.6 ADS sensitivity. It's just and there's no aim assist on those eyes, so normally, like in Destiny on console, when you're aiming at enemies, you have a strong amount of aim assist for all targets, to the point where it actually interferes with your aim in some cases. But with AKELOUS's eyes, you got to shoot him out, and there's no aim assist on his eyes, so it takes a lot of practice. Even if you've done this dungeon like Solo Flawless, and even if you do it weekly for your pinnacles, nothing really compares to doing this encounter over and over again just to shoot AKELOUS's eyes. I wish there was like a AKELOUS eye shooting kind of training mission or something. Like, I wish you could just, without doing all the work and setup, just have something to shoot AKELOUS's eyes out. Maybe there's some third-party software that you can use to work on your aim without aim assist, and maybe I should just do some aim training. But regardless, it takes me a while to do these AKELOUS videos, because every time I do them, I have to like reorient myself to shooting his eyes out without aim assist. And to do that, I kind of need like the best weapons to do it, which for me is either a machine gun. And I'm not using a machine gun here because I'm using a rocket launcher for damage. So otherwise, I'm using a exotic trace rifle. In the past, I've used Ager's Scepter, but any exotic trace rifle will shoot his eyes out fairly effectively. I have two loadouts for this run. I'm using Wormhusk Crown for my survival / setup loadout, which is just kind of a classic universal style of exotic that you could use on Hunter on any build, but with Stasis lacking the ability to heal, it is just generally a good idea to use some kind of either weapon or exotic or something that heals you. And Wormhusk Crown is just like instant, right? So if I'm able to run 100 mobility, which I am here for this survival loadout, 100 mobility, 100 resilience, it means I get my marksman's dodge fairly fast. So yes, I'm using marksman's dodge here because A, it is nicer to reload, and it's going to give me my dodge back faster, which means I can heal on demand more often. It also means I can proc Reaper more often, because producing orbs of power can also be an issue on Stasis, because freezing targets seems to confuse itself with like abilities, and yeah, so sometimes like firepower and hands-on or heavy-handed just don't produce orbs of power. And I say that having like tested this out for quite some time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I find the best way is Reaper is a guaranteed orb of power after every dodge. The next enemy you kill, you get an orb. And then obviously I'm using Harmonic Siphon so that if I get 2 kills in a row, like 2 rapid kills, I can get an orb that way. And that's pretty much it. So that's how I'm producing orbs. And because I'm using Worm Husk, it means I don't have to use recuperation on my legs. I am using Powerful Attraction on my class item so that when I do dodge, I also scoop up any orbs that are nearby. And normally if I wasn't running Worm Husk Crown, I would probably run recuperation so that when I do dodge or pick up an orb of power, I get instant healing. But I'm using Worm Husk Crown, so that means I can put my I can use like Absolution for dodge energy when I pick up an orb of power, and firepower for more grenades. And I can also use a scavenger mod for my rocket launcher so that when I in between damage phases I can pick up enough rockets to do damage. Now I've actually prepped my Cold Comfort because you have to get a finisher to get Restoration Ritual procced on it. So now I'm going into my first damage phase. I've swapped my loadouts before AKELOUS gets there. Use the Trace Rifle to shoot all of his eyes out, and you want to make sure that you do not reload. You have to do it efficiently. If you can't do it, just keep doing it over and over again. Then I then straight into Warden's Law, which is going to have a legally modded holster. And as soon as I see that damage number go down from 25 or 34 to 3,000 something, I pull out Wave Splitter again, tap AKELOUS with it, and then straight to my rocket launcher, and I get to shoot 5 rockets. I get to shoot 4 rockets without reloading, and then a Marksman's Dodge to reload that last rocket. So it is basically dumping 5 rockets, 4 of which will have bait and switch damage, which is good. So yes, rocket launchers kind of inadvertently got a nerf this season with the stealth buff to Gallahorn, or nerf I should say, stealth nerf to Gallahorn. So rockets in general are doing less damage with the help of Gallahorn, but obviously when you're solo you don't have Gallahorn to help you out no matter what. That is why rocket launchers for solo play is actually not amazing, even with the best burst damage rocket launcher in the game, Cold Comfort. It still did about the same amount of damage as my Warden's Law, and it still did about the same amount of damage as an adaptive frame grenade launcher would do with explosive light. I know that because I tested it. I think Cold Comfort does a little bit more damage than Typhon GL5 with explosive light, but that is an option. But basically you just want to have some kind of good burst damage heavy weapon so that when your Lucky Pants are out of luck and your hand cannon is no longer doing the damage boost, then you want to switch off and dump some burst damage on AKELOUS, right? It's just the way it is. If you're on PC and mouse and keyboard and you're very fast at shooting the eyes out, I know some people could do it in like 5 seconds or less. That is just not a reality for me. On console, it takes me almost 10 seconds to shoot his eyes out. So that's like almost half the damage phase goes to shooting AKELOUS' eyes out. And that only leaves me enough time with basically 1 rotation of Lucky Pants, and then a burst damage rotation with a heavy, and I don't have time to swap back to Lucky Pants. If I was able to shoot his eyes out in 5 seconds or less, I would probably be able to get off 1.5 phases of rotations of Lucky Pants. So I would go like Lucky Pants into rockets, back into Lucky Pants. So that's just the reality of it for me, being on console, not being very good at shooting AKELOUS' eyes out. So it is what it is, but my goal for this was to be able to solo AKELOUS in 5 phases. I was nearly going to settle for a 6-phase when I was practicing this because I was having a bit of trouble, but I didn't really feel like it would be all that valuable to put out there for people to solo 6-phase AKELOUS when it is possible to solo 4-phase AKELOUS with like the absolute meta. Like if I was using like a Star Eater's Gathering Storm or Blade Barrage or Celestial Nighthawk with Golden Gun, if I was using the best supers in the game with the best weapons in the game, then yes, you can solo 4-phase AKELOUS if you're very efficient. But I would even argue on console it is less likely. You're more likely to 5-phase, best case scenario, if you're just using a generally good damage loadout, right? So I'm not confined to just using the best, because otherwise I would just be like probably using bait and switch, Cataclysmic or Leviathan's Breath or whatever the meta is for precision damage. But Lucky Pants is up there as respectable damage, especially given the fact that it is a kinetic primary ammo weapon. Like, it is just insane how much damage Lucky Pants can do, especially with this Warden's Law. And so yeah, I saw like the Aztecross video early in the week where he was testing Warden's Law on Vault of Glass, and it turned out that Warden's Law Adept actually out DPS's Malfeasance and the 7th Seraph Officer Revolver. So I had planned a while back to eventually get to a video doing this fight with the 7th Seraph Officer Revolver, because it's fitting, because that revolver actually drops from this dungeon, and you can get, I think, 4th times the charm or reconstruction and Vorpal weapon. But Warden's Law apparently now takes the cake on exotics, legendaries, doesn't matter, is just the best hand cannon in the game to use with Lucky Pants. And on this roll, I've got 4th times the charm and Vorpal with extended mag, so this is pretty much the god roll. You'll notice there that when AKELOUS froze, my damage numbers went up to 35k per burst. So, and I think they're at around 25k max without AKELOUS being frozen first. So Whisper of Rending, I do believe, actually works. The thing is, though, because it's a boss, AKELOUS is freezing and unfreezing. Like, every time you freeze him, he just shatters right away. So it's not like you're going to benefit from Whisper of Rending for the entire damage phase. It's just going to be every now and then you'll land some shots while he's frozen for that split second. A couple other things going for me here with this build from the Seasonal Artifact mod. We do have Monochromatic Maestro. So Cold Comfort is actually benefiting from being on a Stasis subclass, because my Silence and Squall, or any of my abilities for that matter, will apply Monochromatic Maestro, and then it'll give me a Stasis weapon buff. It is a 10% buff from my understanding, and it'll show as a Stasis weapon boost on the left side of your screen in the same way that an Arc Surge mod or a Weapon Surge mod would from your legs. So basically, and for my damage loadout here, I'm using double kinetic surges on my legs and 1 stasis. So what this means is I'm getting an 18% damage buff from surge mods on Warden's Law, and then when I switch to Cold Comfort, I've also got an 18% damage buff on stasis. Because of Monochromatic Maestro giving 1 copy of Stasis Weapon Surge, and the other copy coming from the mod on my legs. So this is kind of just something interesting I noticed after doing this over and over again. getting different damage numbers and paying attention to the buffs on the left side of my screen, because like when I'm making these videos I get a lot of failures obviously, and so I will often just record my damage phase and then review it, so check out, you know, what buffs were active and what wasn't, and so I learn a lot doing this that you don't normally learn unless you're watching stuff back. The only thing though is the monochromatic Maestro buff I think is on a timer, and the timer is separate than your armor charge, right? So it's not like, it's not a decaying buff that is in the same family as surge mods on your legs. It's just monochromatic Maestro will give you that one copy for X amount of seconds. So I did actually notice that when I switched to Cold Comfort, sometimes I was running out of the monochromatic Maestro buff at that point, which is a bit unfortunate because you have to let the timer run out before you can reapply it. So it means that unless I time it perfectly, that I'm just generally not going to have both copies of the. I'm not going to have an 18% damage buff on Stasis by the time I'm using Cold Comfort, because monochromatic Maestro will have ran out. If I'm lucky, I'll get, you know, 1 or 2 shots off, you know, with bait switch and the 18%. But at the very least, I've got 10% on my legs, so it's not a huge deal. But it is something to be mindful of. If you can play into monochromatic Maestro properly, then yeah, you can definitely benefit from it. And that also means that you can add 10% on to triple stasis weapon surge mods, right, from monochromatic Maestro. So if I wanted to, I could have done this with more emphasis on Cold Comfort and less emphasis on Warden's Law. And I don't know what the right balance is, to be honest. I know Warden's Law does a fair amount of damage. My super's doing a bit of damage, and Cold Comfort's doing a bit of damage. So all in all, I think I'm doing about 1.1 million damage per phase, and I would say the damage is relatively split 50-50 between Warden's Law, Lucky Pants, and Cold Comfort. So that's just kind of where I landed with my balance of surge mods, but you can probably play around with it and get very similar results. That last damage phase was actually my worst damage phase, and the reason for that is because I shot AKELOUS' eyes out in a different order than what I was used to. So it took me longer to shoot his eyes out, and then because of that, it just messed up my timing on the damage, and I ended up missing 2 rockets, and I actually almost just decided to jump off and restart at that point. But I realized no matter what, even if I did an optimal damage phase, it's still going to be a 5 phase. So that screw up was really, you know, the difference between a 5 phase and a 5 phase, so long as my other damage phases were optimized. So I just decided to take the risk and keep going, figuring that my next 2 damage phases would be enough to make up for it. But yeah, had I not messed that up, my last damage phase would have been like, you know, it would have been over in like 10 seconds instead of 25 seconds. Wave Splitter here is actually pretty good at taking out the harpies. I normally like to use Trinity Ghoul here if I'm like farming this in a fire team. I pretty much always bring Trinity Ghoul with me, just because you can one-shot the whole lot of harpies with Trinity Ghoul. But it is important to take these guys out. So like with every node you activate, you're going to spawn like 2 sets of harpies. And if you don't take them out, then when you go to start damage phase, then you're going to end up with a whole bunch of harpies shooting you. They might kill you, and they're going to make you flinch, which is going to screw up your aim. It's going to screw up your damage. So it's just not worth it. Take the extra minute or whatever to clear out all the harpies as you're prepping. I did try to do a different strategy actually. In this one, not that you're going to see it in this video, but I tried to save all the fuses for last. So like I would set up all the wires, and I was thinking, well, maybe this won't be so bad because then the harpies won't spawn, right? So you could actually set up all the wires and leave the last 4 fuses untouched. And then technically you can shoot all 4 of them. Like if you have like a scout rifle or something that's a bit longer range than an SMG, you can shoot them all and then activate damage phase faster without having the harpies to deal with along the way. But what I found out was that it's still going to spawn the harpies, and then when you go to start damage, you got to deal with like 20 harpies shooting you, and you don't have enough time to kill them all before you got to do damage. So I scratched that idea, and I think that might be okay in like a fire team. If you just want to get your fire team like to damage phase as quick as possible, then you just kind of nuke AKELOUS. That would be fine. But so these next 2 damage phases I have to be on point. So this time I'm just going with the same pattern that I'm used to, which is to start at the bottom right, get 2 in a row, and then just kind of work my way around clockwise. And I almost screwed up there because actually before I did this video I was using Star Eater skills. So what I would do is I would shoot AKELOUS's eyes out, then switch, then cast my super with Star Eaters, then switch my loadout to Lucky Pants, and then start doing damage. But it really wasn't all that beneficial. Like Star Eaters just doesn't do all that much on Silence and Squall. Silence and Squall is not a DPS super. It's not a damage super. It's not a burst damage super. It is a fire and forget super, but it's designed mainly for ad clear and ad control, right? Just freezing and shattering everything. So like even if it gave me a little bit of extra damage, I found it just wasn't worth it to break the immersion. Not only that, but like I find because you guys as the viewers, like, do you want to see a damage phase where I'm shooting AKELOUS's eyes out and then I'm casting my super, and then instead of seeing the animation for the super, you're seeing me go into my loadouts and swap loadouts? And then I just find for the viewer's experience that is not, it kind of breaks the immersion. Like I like to see my character cast the super, especially with the hunter supers. It just looks cool, and it's less to micromanage during damage phase. So instead I just said screw Star Eater scales, I'll just run Wormhusk Crown so that I can have some survivability during setup. And then when I hit that last node, then I can switch my loadout, and then I'm good to go. Then I'm just waiting for AKELOUS to come over, shoot his eyes out, just do everything in one go without going to my loadouts and switching in between. I don't really enjoy the experience that myself for swapping loadouts like in the middle of a damage phase, but like right before damage phase, I think that's okay. And yeah, so I did much better damage on that last damage phase there. Shot his eyes out fairly fast for me. And then just also getting learning your time window for doing damage also takes some practice, because especially if you're not like super familiar with Lucky Pants or using them for boss damage, you have to learn the timing of when you're out of luck on your Lucky Pants and when it's time to switch, right? And so for me, that took doing this kind of over and over again until I knew like I had 15 seconds to do damage on AKELOUS after shooting his eyes out. That's enough time for me to maximize my illegally modded holster on Lucky Pants, so maximize my Warden's Law damage in about 8 seconds or something like that. And then that gives me just enough time to switch to Wave Splitter, tap him with Wave Splitter, then switch to Cold Comfort and dump all 5 rockets, and by that time damage is done. So getting off those 5 rockets is key, right? But you can't do that unless you've practiced the timing, right? So you have to know when you're on good timing for shooting the eyes out. You have to know when you're out of luck on lucky pants, and when you've got enough time to proc bait and switch and dump all 5 rockets. And ideally, that's right at the end of the damage phase, right? If you're faster than me, like I said earlier in the video, then by the time you're done dumping your rockets, you could switch back to your Warden's Law and reproc illegally modded holster and possibly get off a good amount of burst damage. But like I said, that's more strictly mouse and keyboard, I would say. And even then, like if you're good at mouse and keyboard. Another tip here for doing AKELOUS, I always go to start damage at the same catwalk, and I make sure that the 2 Minotaurs, because they spawn opposite each other and perpendicular, right? So, and pairs. So every time you kill 2 Minotaurs, then the next 2 will spawn perpendicular. So I always make sure that I have the 2 Minotaurs on my damage alley, and then that way I can just kill the 1 Minotaur that's where I'm going to do damage, and then I don't have to deal with any Minotaur shooting me from perpendicular, like from the sides. So this was do or die. Like, I knew it was going to be close. Did I even miss that last rocket? I may have. But interestingly enough, Silence and Squall or the Dusk Field seems to do some tick damage after AKELOUS goes immune. So I think I may have gotten a little bit lucky there and got the solo 5 phase, but anyways, I'll leave some dim links in the description or in the comments, and yeah, let me know what you think. Did you get your God roll Warden's Law? For me, it took 10 Grandmaster clears. I didn't do any of the weapon cheese stuff. I just did normal clears, and then I found out about the farm with the crafted weapons, but I'm not all that interested. It's going to get fixed. And I do enjoy challenge in this game. So anyways, if you enjoyed, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.